Hello, welcome to the Nolan-oscopy. We are here to discuss Memento, the second breakthrough movie of Christopher Nolan. Still fairly iconic, 20 odd years later. I'm Al Schwartz. With me, as always, John Bernard.
Hi, it's me.
How do you feel about Memento?
I like Memento. It's a good movie, right? I mean, solid
Uh,
movie.
well, maybe my take is this that it's a very good movie, and I don't like it much. Um,
Okay, interesting. I'm kind of like that a little bit. It's so good, but
it Yeah, it's such an impressive movie.
very
Like the fact that just I'm just like watching it. My main takeaway is I'm really impressed that this works at all. Uh,
staggering that this works. It's
yeah,
amazing that it works. This should be a gobbledygook mess.
yeah,
Like the entire premise of this shouldn't make any sense. It certainly shouldn't have like a rising and falling dramatic tension.
yeah. And so I'm amazed that kind of works, but I'm also like not very invested in that dramatic tension, especially like once I'm familiar with it. Like kind of sorted out. Okay, here's what is going on, and that story is not super compelling to me. The characters are not that. They're really well acted, uh,
hmm
but they're also like I don't know that I buy much of anything that anybody's doing in this. Like people are just sort of like connected to capital C crime question mark and drugs question mark like
Well, that uncertainty, you could say,
yeah,
is part of the whole deal. That's part of the entire premise of this. And what is good about it is that you kind of have to make assumptions as you're following along the story, just as Leonard does. And hey, they turn out to be mostly wrong, just
yeah,
like in the movie. It is remarkable that this has like any sort of structural elegance to it, but it does. I'm kind of blown away by it, and at the same time, as you say, I kind of I'm a little bit left cold by it. I'm a little bit like, man, I don't really give a shit about these guys at the end of the day.
yeah. Even Leonard, who like is in,
Like especially Leonard.
he could occupy such a place of sympathy. Like he's dealing with such a raw deck, the whole
Mhm.
time. And still, like he's not that likable. I don't know. He's not.
No,
um, I feel for him in occasional moments where he like talks about like how how am I supposed to heal when I can't uh, forget like that the pain is fresh every day because
I
he
mean
can't form new memories and
the,
nothing.
the answer is he's not going to.
Yeah,
Like, like he's just fucked. This entire situation he is in, completely untenable. This is not going
mm-hmm.
to work out. It is. I guess they say it's a real thing. It seems like this is a very movie kind of thing, and it would ruin your life completely. Like you'd be done. Like that's it. No more to do. You can't have a real life at all anymore if you've got short-term amnesia that apparently can't be cured. I don't know. I mean, they don't even suggest maybe it'll go away. It just seems like he's fucked.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose that's not necessarily a thing I needed dramatized to understand that if you have severe brain damage that leaves you unable to create new memories, then yeah, you can't hold it. You can't live a normal, healthy
Yeah, you,
life.
you can't
Like,
drive a car. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
there's a thousand things you can't do anymore. Yeah, and this guy is
I mean,
subject to all of those.
he does. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess he does. Yeah, because I guess you still remember how to drive a car, but if you don't remember where you're going,
yeah. You shouldn't
I
be allowed
yeah,
to. But and I'm not like calling bullshit or anything on this. I can buy that the DMV doesn't have like a set protocol for how to revoke a person's license in
right.
a memento situation. Going back to I guess how I am impressed with this movie, don't really like it. It does combine two of my like pet peeve narrative devices, which I'm like it's always really hard to get me on board with amnesia and the imaginary friend character. Uh, and this kind of does both with the oh he was really Sammy Jenkins all along thing.
Oh,
The sort of Fight
sure.
Club.
I don't get that. Let me tell you, I don't understand what's going on with that.
Well, I mean it posits at the end Teddy,
Uh huh.
Joe Pantoliano character. Joe Pantoliano, I think my favorite part of this movie. Um,
I mean, they're all great, but yeah, he's
yeah,
real good. I think I like Carrie Ann Moss the most, but it's they're right in there.
she's
Yeah,
also really good, but
yeah,
I think Pantoliano is a more believable character.
yeah.
You know,
Yes, it is. I mean, and he's the
uh,
most intriguing. You don't know what his game
yeah,
is, but I'm sorry. We'll get to
yeah.
Joey Pants, but
What he says at the end is that you or I guess that maybe Sammy Jenkins did exist, but what Leonard's been describing about how Sammy Jenkins killed his wife with an overdose of insulin is actually what happened to Leonard.
Right.
And he
Clear
did that.
enough.
His wife,
Okay.
his wife was not attacked. She gave him this insulin test, and he failed it and killed her in the process.
No, she was attacked, I thought. See, this is the thing. There's
I guess, yeah, it
yeah.
must. You're right, because
She
he had
survived
to
the attack.
get the condition first.
Yes, exactly.
And so then Sammy Jacobs does exist. So he's happens to be a guy who, in his day job, met somebody with retrograde amnesia, I think it's called,
Right.
and then
And
went on to get it himself. That's
unless
quite
Sammy
unfortunate.
Jenkins was a construct.
Right.
But Teddy says he was a real guy and a con artist. So I'm assuming Sammy Jenkins is some unrelated guy who was faking retrograde amnesia that was not Stephen Tobolowsky. Like, and that's where I get confused with what's up with Sammy Jenkins, because to some extent he was Sammy Jenkins, to some extent it was an actual other person, but maybe not the Stephen Tobolowsky version. That is kind of still unclear in my mind after watching this a few times. But I know, I mean, I think I figured out everything else, but that was the one I'm still just like, wait a minute. This movie does invite a lot of, wait a minute, a
Yeah.
lot of, how do I figure this out? How does this make sense? And a lot of that is fun and satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
The big one, I mean, since I knew the reveal at this point, of course, the big driving one was I didn't exactly remember what the hell Joey Pants' deal was. Like, what is Teddy getting out of this? What is his game? That was the one that was kind of haunting me through this most recent rewatch. Just because I was like, what is his deal exactly? I certainly don't trust him, but like, why is he doing what he's doing? And that was answered in a satisfactory way.
I do think that I think that there's some value to leaving the Sammy Jenkins stuff like ambiguous, and that it's not, we can't iron that out exactly who's what. Because but I do think that I'm a little disappointed that I don't know. I don't have a clearer picture of what people like. You want people's schemes to be clear at the end when all the reveals have been revealed. And yeah, Joey Pants, I guess his deal is that he, I mean, I believe that he like legit tried to help Leonard at first find the guy who did the attack.
Yeah. And did, it sounds like. Yeah.
And did, and then was like disillusioned and disappointed when it didn't help him. He thought that like, well, they told that there was no physical reason why you couldn't do this. It must be a mental thing, and that helping you get this closure would and revenge would be the cure, because what else? And then it didn't, and then like I buy that he was sort of like authentically hurt, like disappointed by that. And then his response to it, I guess, is that, well, now that I've got this, I'm sort of responsible for this, he was an insulting term for someone with brain damage, but it's almost like I guess, do you think it's coincidence that he calls him Lenny, like Lenny from Mice and Men? That he feels like responsible for this guy who can't function in the world, but is sort of dangerous, and so I'm going to use him as a tool to I guess sick him on various enemies of mine, or drug dealers, or criminals that I want to rob. Like, I don't know. He just got to.
It's some Batman shit, really. Yes.
Yeah, he's like this guy. I mean, the great thing about Joe Pantoliano's performance is that he manages to be sort of a real guy, just sort of dealing with this crazy shit with a sort of real amount. I mean, real in quotes, obviously, but a realistic amount of like annoyance, and he's taking it in stride, but dealing with it and frustrated by it. And he lends some authenticity to the situation. But then it turns out that, he's got this, apparently just had this Rolodex of people that he wanted to sick a vigilante murderer on, which
John G's, close enough to John G,
well, he can just sort of he can fabricate
some shit, yes,
something to make anybody into a John G if he needs to. But it's just like, I don't know. That seems like such a weird thing that if I were in that position, I wouldn't leap to like, that's what I will do with this guy. And also like, where would I start? I don't know. I mean, I suppose Teddy's a police officer, so he knows, or was a police officer maybe.
I think he's got some
underworld plug.
Yeah. I mean, he's an enigmatic character. And I mean, that what you just described is satisfactory enough. I think there's definitely stuff we don't know about him. There's a lot of stuff we're kind of filling in the blanks just by the virtue of it being Joe Pantoliano playing him, I think.
Yeah.
Nolan and I talked about this in some of the reading I was doing about this movie, and he was saying like the most interesting thing to me is the person who has all the answers is the least trustworthy actor in Hollywood.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's actually something that is good for the movie.
Yeah.
And you're right that Joey Pants is fantastic at playing this sort of at playing lying, I
Hmm.
guess. Or he's so untrustworthy that when he's good at portraying scenes where you expect he's lying, but then you're like, but what if he's telling the truth? And you just he
Yeah.
can't. He's good at playing characters who can't quite sell sincerity. Um, that
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good
that
way of putting
is
it.
his send off in The Sopranos is like the gold standard for that, where it is a masterclass in his like final sequence on that show. You still don't know at the end if he's lying. Like he was capable of doing this thing, but I think maybe he didn't do it. And
Yeah, that's a
this
great
whole
scene.
movie like does that too.
He was on a run at this time,
Yeah,
right? 20 years ago, he was in everything.
The
20 years ago.
Matrix. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he was in The Matrix. He was in Sopranos, like enormous cultural things. And he was also like, doing stuff like this,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like Bound, just these
Yeah.
fantastic supporting performances in crime films and noirs and just everywhere in Hollywood. Daredevil. He was all, I
Yeah,
don't know what,
right.
Bad Boys, this was happening around here. And I don't know, like, why his star was so like huge for like 5 years, and then it kind of seemed to go back to normal, I guess. I mean, he's still in stuff, but like
I mean, I need to check the dates on things, but I assume it's The Matrix. Got him a flurry of gigs, and of course, like with The Sopranos and with this, like he's nailing them. So,
right.
uh, you know, it went on for a while. But it turns out, I mean, he's got a lane, I guess, that you can't just drop him in anything. Uh, but man, he's a great villain. He's a great sleaze. Um, anyway, well, going back to sort of the reveal about him, though, I
Yes.
think what it makes the plot function on a basic level when you realize that's his scheme, that he's been doing this thing.
Right. That
Uh,
is kind of what it seems to be. It's just something that makes the movie work. It's
right, because he
yeah.
needs to have an agenda in order for this to make sense, and that's an agenda that is internally consistent. Right? Okay, that plot now like makes a degree of sense, but it is just a bit grandiose and comic booky, I guess,
That's
to
true, but the
come in
whole
that late in
thing,
the game.
the whole movie is so movie-ish, it's so premisey and so specifically noirish in many aspects, and also has this ridiculous structure that does not mirror reality in any way. That I'm pretty okay with tropes in this. I'm pretty okay with Natalie being such an obvious femme fatale. There's
Mm.
another character that I don't trust at all from the minute she's introduced. Like well, I mean that just the nature of this film makes it impossible to trust anything. I guess, which is again part of the point. But
Yeah,
much like the girl in Following, it did seem like this femme fatale character that he brings in is very explicitly untrustworthy, and he is a fool for trusting her at all at any point.
certainly.
Yeah.
But he has more excuses than the follower did,
Sure,
but,
yes.
with his brain damage.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of excuse most of the things about this movie because of its premise. In a lot of ways, the premise allows for a lot of nonsense.
Yeah, but that to me that's what I think that hurts the rewatchability of it. I hadn't watched it since like the year 2000, and now I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. I came back to it like, this is still impressive. I'm also not going to watch it again for another 20 years.
Same here. I hadn't seen this since it came out. I mean, I saw it a few times back then, I remember, but like it wasn't a film I revisited. This is not one that is like in my rotation at all. And I think I assumed it was because I don't care about the characters. Like I
Yeah,
do not like Leonard particularly. And I mean, the more you learn about him, the less you like about him.
right.
And yeah, I don't recall didn't recall any big sequences or anything. Just kind of like, yeah, it had an interesting structure and it was good, but it didn't ever get me in that visceral way that some people it did. It's so cerebral and so
Yeah,
specific, and there are not many movies like it, so it makes sense, and it's obviously really well made. So I get it, but it didn't happen for me.
I think it really connects with people who like are Sudoku addicts or something. That it's one for the puzzle people,
Yeah.
which will be a recurring theme throughout our Nolanoscopy here. But I certainly like, but I think there was what I remembered throughout the years a couple of like standout bits. the chase scene that suddenly cuts in where he's like, "What am I doing? I'm chasing this guy. Oh nope, he's chasing me."
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that was funny and clever. It's very unique to this premise, being able to do something like that. You know, that's maybe I always remember the one joke in a Christopher Nolan movie. There's
Yeah.
about one per 90 minutes. There might be two in The Dark Knight Rises or something when he
This
gets to
one,
the 3 hour ones. But
this one struck me as one of his funnier ones. I think
mhm.
Joey Pantoliano is just a funny actor, so he's amusing no matter what he's in.
Yeah,
And yeah, those moments, they do take advantage of those. Like, oh, I don't feel drunk. What am I? Yeah, that stuff.
yeah.
And
Or the bit
just
with Mark Boone Jr. is like, wait, so how many rooms are you renting me in this shithole? just two so far.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
one where you believe him in that moment that it's only two so far.
I mean, there's that thing where, yeah, like, I mean, that all goes to the just nothing is trustworthy. Like everyone will
Mhm.
fuck you given the opportunity of this sort of nihilistic premise. But at the same time, this is a light film in a lot of ways, and I mean, I don't know.
It's short. That's the only way I can think of.
Yeah, it's true. It's sunny. It's I
Mm,
don't care about the characters, so it is entirely an exercise. You know, like I'm very much aware that I'm seeing a magic trick rather than
right.
a narrative that I'm really being pulled along by. It's amazing. It
Yeah.
functions as a narrative, but at the end of the day, it's kind of not the thing.
Well, one of the other things that stuck out that I remembered was sort of like Carrie Ann Moss's big sequence
Right. It's
where
the
she's
big
like,
scene.
and how like she had when you go back and watch it because it's going in reverse order, you can go back to the future of the storyline, and or it's later in the storyline, it's earlier in the chronology, and she goes into it kind of like knowing that there's going to be a fight here, and so she's hiding all the pens in the
Yeah.
house before she provokes him, and then fixes fight, and then just goes out in the driveway for a while, and it's like that is it's utilizing the premise in interesting, like clever ways, but it's also like the way this stuff doesn't hang together for me. Like, okay, even if you're in her position, you've got these ill intentions. Like, his condition is so not reliable enough to like just think that you could take the pens away and that's good enough to
It's
like
true. Yeah, there's actually no need for the big showy, like, what are you? You're a stupid retard, and I'm going to manipulate you. She doesn't actually
you know,
need. That's entirely for the audience, or I guess for her. You
I mean,
can justify that she's a
she's
rotten
got
person and is enjoying it.
sure, and
Yeah.
she's got a legit reason to be angry with him that
Oh
that
yeah, he sucks
he
too.
murdered her
Yeah.
boyfriend. But it's just like if I'm plotting revenge against that guy, like it's definitely not reliable enough to just be like, all right, I'm gonna go take a 2 minute breather in the driveway and jump back in and be fully confident that your amnesia will have kicked in and I'll have a fresh light by now, because it is sort of like
Yeah.
it's part of the magic trick that like sometimes he can like the window he gets to make new memories and hold them in his head is like 5 minutes, and sometimes it's an hour or two, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah, it's very much reliant on the needs of the film.
Yeah,
I don't care though. That's fine. That if that's how they want to play it, that this is the memory loss movie. Like
I don't mind that
I'll take the.
the screenwriters
Mhm.
are playing it that way. I mind that the character of Natalie is like
Yeah, it's all
feels
right.
like she has a secure enough grasp on his like
It's worth it for the
physiology.
effectiveness of the scene though. For
Yeah, yeah,
the fun of her doing that thing in that moment is worth the kind of the cheat, I think, because the movie's all cheats. It's all sleight of hand. Yeah. So of course, it's fine because that's the big scene I remember. Going in, I was just like, oh yeah, that thing Carrie Ann Moss does is great.
yeah.
And
You're right. It is, the
yeah,
cheat is worth it in that case because it's the movie's certainly not like worse for having that in there. And you, if you're going to do this like silly premise that I don't really like on paper that much, I think yeah, you want to utilize it to its greatest degree. So that's a thing you can do with it, and it's effective. Uh, it's also kind of bullshit, which is why again, rewatching, I'm kind of like the magic
uh,
trick is great the first time. It's less impressive each time after that.
yeah. When you see how it's done, Ebert talked about this in his review. Had like one line that kind of summed up the whole thing for me, which is just like, yeah, I actually had to watch this twice because I wanted to really get a grasp on it, and it was better the first time for sure.
Mm.
I definitely understood it all better the second time, but the effect of watching it was way better when I existed in a state of confusion, and that's where the movie wants you. So, in a way, 20 years later, as I was watching it, I was kind of like, I almost feel like I can't really assess how this movie works anymore. Like,
Hmm.
I kind of feel like knowing exactly what's going on here, it cuts out a major part of the film. And there's films that are like that. When you know what's going on, when you know who's Kaiser Soze, the movie is different. This film does feel disproportionately hurt by that to some extent.
More than usual. If Suspects or Fight Club, probably, yeah. Like Fight Club, for example, is a different kind of fun the second time
Right.
around. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's not as surprising, but I think this was hurt because it's got less humor to it than like Fight Club is sort of silly and satirical the entire way through, whereas this is doing a more straightforward noir thing. And another running theme here is that humor is never going to be the strongest part of the Nolan works.
Right.
But because of that, the second time through, you are more divorced from the like first person perspective of Leonard that the movie is structured around.
Yeah, he
And so,
becomes a
like,
specimen, something you're observing.
exactly,
Not just because
that's
he's so shirtless either, but like
yeah,
just like it's kind of watching a thing play out when you're the God character as opposed to the POV character.
mhm.
Yeah.
yeah. And so it's just a little less engaging that way. But that's again a Nolan thing is that he is a bit of a cold filmmaker. Maybe not like
Yeah.
fully Kubrick levels, but he he's a mechanic. He is interested in the magic tricks, which we'll get into in the Prestige, and Inception especially,
Yeah, a
um,
lot of his stuff.
which I think
Dunkirk,
are two of
all
his
that.
better ones. Yeah,
For sure.
um, but he is not an emotional, immediate filmmaker, and I think
Yeah.
that makes maybe one of the more interesting ones to look at will be Interstellar, where it's him trying to make a Spielberg movie,
Yeah.
even though like nothing in his nature lends itself to that. Uh, but
Remember
anyway,
that being a very cold film. I'm very interested to revisit it. um,
well,
Cerebral is how I describe it.
certainly.
Like it's all of the mind. None of the gut, none of the heart, none of the groin. It's all
Certainly no
yeah.
groin.
Like this is. I mean, this one could be a sexy film. I mean, you have sexy people in this movie
Mhm.
being sexy with each other. I mean, Guy Pearce and Carrie Ann Moss have chemistry clearly.
Yeah,
It's just not happening though in this. It's just
and
not.
I think that's actually for the better in this case. Is like I think that would stand out to me even more than like the pen thing of
Yeah.
well as traditional as it is for femme fatales to like seduce
Hmm.
the hero like the patsy as part of their whole thing. Uh, Here it's like completely unnecessary
Yeah.
for her to do that, and she knows that, and she hates him from the start. So
I
the
mean,
start of the story, the end of the movie.
when he sleeps at her place, he just sleeps there, and she
Yeah.
allows him to think that they slept together. Right? That's what's going
Yes.
on. Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But we don't need to include an actual sex scene, or she doesn't need to
No.
actually go through with it because she knows she doesn't need to go through with it to
Yeah.
make him think that, and there'd be no
Hmm.
reason to. So yeah, I mean, I think we'll have a little bit of fun at Nolan's, general sexlessness, but I don't think that this movie is hurt by a lack of that.
That's a good point. Yeah. This you're right. It doesn't need that. I mean, that's the thing about this movie. It's so singular, and it does not need a lot of the things you would normally need to function. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think some humor and some more relatability probably would have made it a film I responded to more. Maybe I don't know. I'm just kind of like trying to figure it out. But in the end of the day, it's so much itself, and maybe this one is just not for me. Kind of,
Well,
like
and
it.
it's
it
such an intricate machine that
yeah,
yes, there I can identify like elements that I think would make me like it more, but I'm not sure how you include
yeah,
more humor or different perspectives in this like without the machine falling apart. Like I don't know that you can
exactly.
add or take away too much from this and have it still actually function because it's sort of a miracle functionality as it is.
Hmm. And that's what's so impressive. And the other part, I mean, when this came out again, this guy had nothing on his resume. No one saw
Mm.
Following. No one knows what Following is. At the time, I thought this was his debut film. I mean, it was years later before I found out Following existed, and years later again before I finally sat down and watched it. So this is a debut. We don't know what this guy's bag of tricks is. We don't know that he's going to go on to become one of the hugest directors in Hollywood. He's just a guy who put together a crime film that got some attention, and it is a distinct crime film. This is so notable in a sea of movies like it, around that time, When is
I
this,
think this
2001?
is it two? I think it's 2000, but I think it's
Right.
yeah, and I think that it's also like sort of like peak big twist time in movies,
It is
where
that,
like
yes.
before like the internet, like before Twitter could spoil uh a twist that fast. Like it was just word of mouth, uh, and word of mouth could tell people, oh, you got to see this, but you wouldn't just like it's harder to do that now, and maybe also people don't have the patience that people want to look up the end to like decide whether they're going to give it their time.
That would be such
Uh,
an unsatisfying way to experience Memento.
yeah, I mean it's got, and I don't know if the big twist is what people even remember this for, but
Nah. Yeah.
but the whole like this the whole setup is a twist. It's that everything's topsy turvy, and you kind of know you're in a usual suspect situation or whatever like from the start because everything's so fractured and backwards.
Well, there's like a
Um,
reveal every 5 to 10 minutes in this film. Like
yeah,
oh that yeah
every scene is a twist ending almost,
yeah
where you're,
uh-huh.
and then you're going and like reevaluating what you've seen in light of that, the way that you do kind of do when you get to a big twist ending in a movie.
Yeah,
Um,
and you know there's going to be the other shoe's going to drop on both Natalie and Teddy. You know both of them
yeah,
have something they're not showing us. You know
yep,
that the notes on the Polaroids are not going to be 100% reliable.
mm-hmm,
That's what's so interesting. Like the knowing from the very beginning that that Teddy's Polaroid says, "Don't believe his lies. Don't trust him. He's the guy." Knowing that you're almost like I don't know. And when you're watching the movie, you're kind of like, well, that can't be right. That
yeah,
can't be the answer to this. And as we see, it's his handwriting, and then and yeah, I mean, we'll get to the final revelation, which even now I still do think is pretty good. Like I do really like the last twist that this gives you. That really works for me, and it kind of ties it together and makes it a thing that has more relevance than I'm into it at this point. Like I said, I'm not really loving this film, but while I watched it, I was just kind of like, I got to admit, this is working. This is a well-made fucking movie. There's just no question about it.
yeah. And maybe is there some resonance in 2021? Let's
Yes.
try and update this. So because the big end twist, I guess, is that Leonard finds out that he already killed the man who touched his wife a long time ago, and he's just been chasing, uh, you know,
Ghosts, really. Just,
ghosts. Yeah.
yeah, there's no way to satisfy this thing that's inside him because he'll forget.
He also finds out that Teddy knows that and has been using him by pointing him at particular ghosts and saying, "Hey, that's your guy," and making himself rich in the process. And so he's mad that he's being used by Teddy, so he chooses to like give himself notes for the next time he wakes up that put him on the trail of Teddy as the culprit that he will kill next. Um, and so he's sort of shades of Inception's ending here too. He's choosing knowingly choosing his own reality, or like
Yeah.
it's not real, but I'm going to go ahead and live this. And I suppose there's something to that in 2021. How we that the
Oh,
uncertainty
it's.
that Leonard lives with
Mhm.
is vaguely analogous to the uncertainty that we get from living in an information age where we have all this, uh, you know, more access to information, and we're just less and less certain of anything because of it. And so we kind of consciously choose to silo ourselves off into, I want to live in this digital environment where I'm the most comfortable, even if I know on some level it's not the full picture.
Yeah, this is the reality that I prefer. This is
Yeah.
the person I would like to believe that I am. I guess. Yeah, he has that moment of clarity where he understands that he's lying to himself, that he's
Mm.
just irreparably broken, and he accepts it and just says, "Yeah, well, hey, like you said, he's also a John G, and he can just lie
Yeah.
and be happy because he knows that it won't be revealed because he will forget it. Like he's confident in his ability to trick himself, just like Natalie was earlier. It's a fucked up ending. It's a really, and I like that a lot. It's really strong, and I don't know. It's a lot harder to be like, well, that's all of us. Although in 2021, clearly, well, that's all of us. Uh,
Yeah, I feel like it's
it's
a bit of a stretch that even though as I
I
was
was
going
looking
through
for
that,
it. I was,
yeah,
but no, it's unmissable now when you watch it. Where it's a guy choosing his own reality based on what he thinks flatters him, the biases that he prefers, that you cannot miss in
Yeah.
2021 because we are, kind of living that all the time, whether it's in ourselves or in just the world, over. It's impossible not to be thinking about that watching Memento now. And that's kind of cool that it has that new relevance, but it's also not really, it's not the
Yeah.
final statement on it that you want it to be.
uh, I think that actually Inception kind of plays that bit better, where it's more of a choice in that at the end of that one to choose the fantasy, or like to sort of, there's a rejection of reality there. Whereas in Memento, it's almost like
Interesting.
Leonard doesn't have the option of choosing
Right.
like the truth and reality and functioning, like accepting the truth and moving on. So, I mean, he chooses the fantasy best suited to him, but it's not actually a rejection of reality so much as it's just an acceptance that he's not incapable of functioning in reality. Um,
Which,
I mean,
fair point, Leonard.
yeah,
That's right. You are. Might as well have something driving you, because otherwise it's nothing. You're going to a home. That's it. That's all you
yeah,
got. Uh, but yeah, like I would have to agree. Inception actually does this a little better, a lot better, maybe. It's one of the few Nolan films that really lands the emotional payoff for me. Like, this is, like we've said, this is not a thing he usually does. It works for me in there. I'm excited to revisit that one. But yeah, this one, it becomes very, it's reading an essay about the premise, not feeling it as a narrative.
yeah. So, I mean, that was our sort of opening thought, and I think it's our final thought too. I think that it's a short movie. I don't have a ton more to say about it.
I mean, I don't know. Is there anything to talk about performance wise? I mean, we talked about how good everyone is.
Just
We didn't talk about
yeah,
Pierce much. He's really good in this. Looks like a blonde ghost. He's really terrific. You get why he was a star. Or, is a star. He's still a star.
sort yeah. He never had his like enormous movie star moment, but he seems to have had the career that he wanted. I mean, like he doesn't.
Yeah.
He works. It seems like as much as he wants to, and does some cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fan of the Proposition, the western he did with Nick Cave.
This seems like this was the most cultural kind of like his biggest leading man success artistically in a lot of ways. Like,
L.A. Confidential, right?
I mean that
not,
one's better. Yeah, I think that movie's fantastic, but that is shared in a way. You wouldn't necessarily say he's the lead of that film. I guess he's the protagonist in the end, ultimately.
yeah.
But
I mean, he's
you also
technically
got
the lead, but you're right. Crow is sort
Crow
of like
and
the
Spacey, and a lot of folks are in there. Yeah,
yeah,
and
and
this
Crow is
one,
sort of the breakout character there that
right?
people remember most.
And he's in every shot of Memento. He's there. He's carrying the whole thing. This is, I don't know, splitting hairs, I guess, to some extent. This was not too long after LA Confidential either. This is kind of when he had his big run where they let him star in movies like The Time Machine, things like that. But again,
Oh
he's
yeah,
still around.
yeah,
Yeah, you're
yeah.
right. We don't
He
have much more
finally
to
did
say.
he finally did a Marvel movie 15 years later. He had the Marvel bod, ready to go
Yep,
at near 2000.
he's pretty good in that. He's always pretty good. He's a good actor, but he is kind of better when he's playing villains. And this is sort of a villain protagonist, a little bit.
Yeah, it's like we talked about that though. He's less likable as time goes on, and
Mm-hmm.
then when you start over from the beginning, it's hard to like invest in him at all.
Yeah. Yep. When you know what to deal. Oh, first notable dead wife in Nolan film here.
That's true. We
Yeah,
got
and it's a
the
big
dead
one.
wife and the evil femme fatale. That's
Right. Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
twofer.
Yeah. That's another thing Inception has going for it, which is the dead wife is the evil femme fatale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it streamlines it. So maybe that's the thing, is that Nolan's making one movie kind of continuously, because how following felt like a dry run for this in some ways. A little more straightforward, but also has the twisted mentor character with the that's sort of guiding around and setting up the uh, protagonist who's of dubious moral character themselves, and also kind of dresses the same in a way that you imagine is Christopher Nolan's fashion sense, and is also has being played by the femme fatale. And then Inception is a continuation of some of that from this.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how many times he actually kind of just remakes premises. Like I had not connected this to Inception in my mind, but thinking about it, yeah, 100%, absolutely. Inception feels like the maximalist version of this in a lot of ways. Just divorced from the gimmick.
Well, it's got a different gimmick.
Yeah, it has
He's
a
just
different,
sort of moved on.
but it has that temporal shifting. It has that that he's like, okay, well, this time is actually happening. Concurrently with this time, just slower. All that shit. God, he does that a lot, doesn't he? I mean,
Yeah.
thinking back, he does that in Dunkirk and obviously Tenet as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
So we'll get real before we even get there, though. To Inception, we're going to get another dead wife in The Prestige.
yeah, there's Dead Wife in The
So
Prestige. There's Dead Wife in a few things coming up. Does Maggie Gyllenhaal count?
yeah, I think she does, and I don't know if you count Martha Wayne. But before we do any of that, we're coming up on Insomnia next. I don't remember if there's a dead wife in that one.
I don't either. But I'm excited for that one. I like Insomnia. It'll be a fun time, I think, to revisit it. It's very dissimilar to his other films, although it is the first in the In trilogy.
I suppose it is. It's a weird fetish. He's just one word in movies.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I must have watched Insomnia in college. I don't remember a single thing about it except that I think Robin Williams is the villain, right?
Sure is. Yeah.
And
well, depends what you mean by villain, but yes, yeah, he's the bad guy. Mm-hmm.
And there's a foot chase across some like floating logs. Those are the two things that I can tell you about Insomnia. But we'll get into that next time. Maybe it's good.
You're going to like it, I think. You're going to be surprised. It's a pretty damn good thriller. It's not the kind of huge thing that he got known for doing. I kind of wish he had more stuff like Insomnia on his resume. And probably the one, it has a lot of stuff that doesn't quite fit in the Nolan motif, I would say. The most dissimilar one in many ways.
Probably the most forgotten Nolan movie, if you're not counting Following. That it was not forgotten so much as nobody ever heard of it. And my assumption is that's because it's more of a for hire thing. It's not. Maybe he didn't write it.
Well, we'll talk about it. I got some takes on it. I think you're gonna like it. Like I said, it's fun, and we'll have a guest for that one, and that'll be coming up next on Nolanoscopy.
Yeah.
All right, man. Have a good day.
You too.